All right, welcome everybody to the Grand Forks City Council meeting, special meeting for Monday, November 27th, 2023. So we get a roll call, please, Maureen.
Weigel.
Oh, we got Stern, Miss Stern instead. She even got that wrong. All right, please.
Weigel. Osowski.
Here.
Weber. Lunsky.
Here.
Kwame. Sandy.
Here.
Veen. We have a quorum.
All right, thank you. Item 1.2, Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I don't have any announcements. Item 1.3, I think this will be a really short special meeting, and then we'll move on to the COW meeting with President Sandy. So move on to item 2, public hearings and second readings of ordinances.
Public hearing and second reading of ordinance amending city code relating to Class 5 hotel motel classification of alcohol beverage license.
All right, so we'll open up the public hearing for item 2.1. Anybody here to speak from the public, item 2.1? All right, seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing portion. We got a motion to approve from President Sandy, a second from Vice President Weber. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, sign. Motion carries unanimously. Are we looking for a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion from President Sandy, second from Ms. Osowski. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. We'll call the Grand Forks City Council Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, November 27th to order under item 1. Call to order 1.1, welcome and roll call. Thanks, Mayor.
Weigel.
Here.
Osowski.
Here.
Weber. Lunsky.
Here.
Kwame. Sandy.
Here.
Veen.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great. We have no updates or information items under discussion items. Item 3.1, committee appointments and reappointments. We have Mr. Sherwood and Ms. Goodman for the library board and Mr. Fisher for the event center. Any comments or questions?
Move approval.
Moved by Weigel, second by Osowski. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same
Aye.
sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 3.2, 2023 employee holiday hours. The mayor and I always nominate 4 additional hours over the holidays for the employees. They can use it up through July 1st. It's what I think is a nice gift for the employees. It gives them an opportunity for the folks that have to work over the holidays that they can get some time later on, and some folks need an additional break. So any questions or thoughts on that, Mr. Weigel? Yes, sir.
President Sandy, do we have the ability to close City Hall at noon again? I think we've done that in the past. I think it matches the state and what they do. I think it's pointless to be open all day, 8 to 5 on Christmas Eve. So if we could put that into the motion as a recommendation, maybe.
Or what about New Year's Eve then, Mr. Weigel?
No, Christmas Eve.
Okay.
Said what I said.
Sounds
Council
good.
President Sandy,
Yep.
I would only say that Christmas Eve falls on Sunday.
Yeah.
So,
We're definitely closing at noon,
yeah.
Christmas Eve.
Not an issue then.
But we've appreciated in the past where you guys have done that, where you've allowed us off earlier on Christmas Eve, so thank you for that.
We can discuss that again next year.
Yep.
Yeah, good. So, any other comments? Ms. Lunsky?
You said it's for people who have to work?
It's
on the
every
holidays?
city employee gets the additional 4 hours.
So if someone works on the holidays, they're,
They also get their holiday.
gotcha.
That's correct. Yep.
I move approval.
Moved by Osowski, second by Weigel. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 3.3, 2024 CDBG and CSG programs. Ms. Richards, good evening.
Good evening. I come before you about this time every year to start the allocation process for the Community Development Block Grant and Community Service Grant programs. Typically, this is a simultaneous competitive application process, and that's what is recommended for 2024. You may recall last year, the full CDBG project budget of $2.35 billion was allocated on a set-aside basis rather than competitively to the Senior Center kitchen expansion and remodel project. Since that was such a big part of our CDBG program, I kind of held off on the 2024 budget until we knew where we were with that project. Bids for the senior center were finally opened on November, well, a couple weeks ago. I think it was the 14th of November. And the good news was that the low bid came in at $2.175 million, so that gave us a cushion of about $175,000. The bad news is that that cushion is pretty much consumed by A&E fees. And so in discussion with the architect, staff recommended an additional set aside of $190,000 of 2024 funding to that senior citizen project to cover hazardous material testing costs that we have incurred. We know we've got some asbestos mitigation and remediation costs that will be coming, and then the architect recommended adding a 5% construction contingency for those unexpected things that come up. So anyway, with that under our belts, staff put together a budget recommendation for 2024. That's what you will see on your staff report, the bottom of page 1. We're in a kind of an unusual situation in that typically there's only one proposed budget, but this year when we presented that budget to the Community Advisory Committee, they recommended against the set-aside. And so if you compare the two budgets that are on your staff report, where you have the CAC recommendation on top, staff recommendation on the bottom, the funding sources are the same in both versions. The administration is the same in both, with $105,000 of CDBG money for administration, which includes a $5,000 annual set aside for High Plains for housing, as was recommended in last year's process. The CSG funding is the same under both scenarios, which was the $154,500, which would be a competitive operating grant program as funded out of Fund 2163. The $15,000 contingency is the same, which is just a safety net in case we estimate badly with what our CDBG entitlement money will be. And then the difference, as I said, was CAC recommendation is that all of the CDBG project money, that's $865,000, they recommend that be allocated on a competitive basis. And staff recommendation is that $190,000 for the senior center be pulled out as a set aside and the balance allocated competitively. Otherwise, CAC was completely on board with the senior center project. They don't have a problem with it. They just felt that after all of 2023 funding was allocated to them on a non-competitive basis, that any additional funds they should compete with other agencies for 2024. Ms. Linsky is on that committee, so she can certainly speak to that discussion. Other than that, CAC was satisfied with the rest of the process, which your staff report includes a schedule. Once you authorize us to proceed, then we would advertise in the Herald on December 6th that we have funds available. Deadline for applications would be the 10th of January. CAC would review and rank the applications the following week. We would come back to the Committee of the Whole on January 22nd with those rankings and funding recommendations and set a public hearing date. And then on March 18th, hold that public hearing and request final approval of our draft 2024 annual action plan to kind of wrap up that public process. So the request before you tonight is to determine which of those budget scenarios you prefer, and then authorize staff to proceed with the allocation process as I just described. And so with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions from Ms. Richard? Ms. Osowski?
I just want to make sure I understand this. So, I mean, I know that we set aside that money for the senior center, and now they need additional funds for the same project, correct?
That's the recommendation.
So, but then the committee wants to have those funds that are needed to finish the senior center have different organizations compete for them. So then what happens if they start the project and then the senior center doesn't have the funds to finish it? Then they have and we own that building, do we not? The city of
Correct.
Grand Forks does. Don't you think that we should take care of our own buildings before we just set aside or, let other people come in and compete for our funding? I mean, we're responsible for that building regardless, correct?
Well, that was staff's recommendation, was that that was a council priority last year and to fully fund it. Would the project go forward? Perhaps on a competitive basis, they would rank high enough to be funded that way. It's just kind of a guarantee of funding with a set aside, and the CAC is a recommending body, so city council can kind of do whatever you want, so to speak, but it's just a difference in process.
I guess I'd like to see us, I mean, especially since the city already owns that building, I think that we should set aside the remainder of the funds that the Senior Citizen Center needs and not, otherwise, I don't know how we'll pay for that then, I mean,
Well-
we own the building, we'll have to pay for it eventually. So I say that we do set aside the money for the senior center to finish their, whatever they need to do.
Ms. Lansky? Yes, ma'am?
But as of right now, they don't need that money, right? When you open the bids, it came back under.
Well, we know that we have additional costs, and so that the difference between the CDBG allocation and the bids is about $175,000. And we know that there are $175,000 in A&E fees that have not yet been paid. So that cost would have to be absorbed somewhere. And then
say that-
additional costs would come from the hazardous materials testing and abatement. The contingency is just that, that is not a cost that we know, but that was a recommendation from the architect, is that on a project of this magnitude and with a building this old, there will almost certainly be something that comes up that was missed in the bidding.
And what happens then if they don't need those funds?
If they're not used,
Yep.
then it just becomes, well, they would either have to request a change order to do additional work, or they would just revolve back into the pot as unobligated funds.
But I think one thing we're missing too is that we talked about the senior center could skinny down a little bit, right? And they could reevaluate their budget to work in.
Well, that's the alternative, is if they're not fully funded, what could be cut?
Ms. Lansky, can I ask you a question? So your line of questioning makes me think that you disagree. Do you disagree because you think that it should be competitive, or you simply want more money to go for potentially the other organizations? Neither is wrong. I'm
Right.
just trying to understand your
I
your
think
point
it
of
should be
view.
competitive because they got the set-aside money last year. And so I think that they should be put into the pool with everyone else to compete for those funds.
And that's basically the position of the CAC in general.
Mr. Weber? Yes, sir?
Could I ask a couple questions about the CAC? The membership of the CAC, how long do people serve on that, and how are they chosen? And how did the vote go down? Was it a 49-51 vote or 99?
Well, in terms of the vote on this, it was not unanimous, but it was close. I think
Okay.
we had only 2 members of the committee that weren't present for that meeting, and there was only 1 vote against the process that they recommended. So it was like 9-1. In terms of the process to establish the membership, that's done in conjunction with the, what is it, nonprofit business?
Oh, the Nonprofit Business Alliance?
Yes, I'm
okay.
trying to get my acronym
They
straight.
choose the CAC members.
Right. It's relatively informal, people, every year we ask, are you willing and able to serve? A lot of people continue for a long period of time, others come and go. And you'll see in the membership list that, we've got several new members this year, but several that have been with us for several years as well.
I have faith in the CAC process, but I also respect staff and trying to follow through on this previous commitment. So I'm torn on this one, yes.
Is there a compromise? Ms. Stern, did we, in the budget for next year, did we account for $105,000 for administration? If we don't keep 105, are we going to have to lay off somebody, one of our employees, or if we give that money away?
I believe it's in the budget, but we can work around it if we have to.
So it seems to me that administration is always somewhat arbitrary, and it's not that our employees are going to be let go. We find other sources of funds to pay for them. And so, I mean, perhaps a compromise would be to cut administration from 105 to 55, and then put $50,000 more into the competitive process, while still funding and getting our senior center done. And I think in cash carryover, we have more than enough money to cover the $50,000 shortfall. And it maybe doesn't go all the way to what the Community Advisory Committee wanted, but I think it hopefully shows them that we appreciate the time and effort that they put in, and recognize that that competitive process is important. But that's just an idea.
The administration budget is capped by HUD, that the maximum we can use on administration is 20% of our budget. And so this is pretty close to the maximum. But you're right, of course, that there are other sources of funding available to the city to pay salaries. So it's certainly at your behest.
I would be open to that compromise if others thought it was okay. But Mr. V?
Mr. Sandy?
Yes, sir?
I just wanted to get out, I really appreciate having the willingness of that committee to take another look at it and make recommendations. That's always appreciated, and take a look at, think of things outside the box a little bit that way. But I have to say I'm very supportive of, I think, the staff recommendation in this. I think to arbitrarily reduce that administration and then pull it from another area, I guess we don't know where that's exactly defined, is probably not the thing that I would recommend. I think it's a city-owned building. I think Ms. Sowski said it very well. We need to make sure we take care of that. And then I think keeping aligned with the staff recommendation and being consistent, again, is my preferred way to move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Veen. So, anybody thoughts? Mr. Weber?
The costs that we're looking at are all projections. They could change between now and then. So you've suggested that, well, we need to make sure we've got the money to cover it, but the costs could go beyond that anyway. One of the things that's happened here is the nonprofit community agreed with some great degree of consensus last year to support the senior center in that one time, that they would all give up their opportunity to go for competitive funding to support the senior center. And the senior center is not being forgotten or left behind in this. They're getting a full year's worth of CDBG funding, and with President Sandy's compromise approach, some coverage for those additional costs.
Well, and as I said earlier, there's no ill will towards the senior center, that project.
Right.
It's just kind of the mindset that a level playing field where they have to compete would be preferable to a second set aside. You know, the flip side of that is if this is the top priority project of the city, then it should be fully funded. And I leave it to you fine people to make that call.
I have a question. Like, can you give me some examples of nonprofits then that would be competing for these funds?
Well,
Like in the past, maybe, you know?
sure. Previous large-scale projects have been done at the Mission, CVIC. Listen Center hasn't got big funding from CDBG recently, but they're certainly eligible. Salvation Army.
They get money, like CVIC and the Listen Center, do they not already, I mean, they were in the budget, though, for last year. Did they not get any funds?
CVIC has a line item in the city budget for some of their operations. This money is for bricks and mortar projects. So CVIC they're in an old building, and they're a growing organization, so I would imagine that they would have a couple applications.
I think that-
Spectra Health has had some big applications in the past.
I think we need to take care of ourselves as a city first before we start shelling out more additional funds to nonprofits, in my opinion.
So can we go back to the budget? So last year they were allocated 2.35 million. The bid opened up at 2.1. So they still have 200,000 for contingency. So they already have the 200. Why are we giving them another 190?
Well, the difference between the 2.35 and the low bid is about $175,000. And they have A&E fees that they have incurred that would spend that whole gap or cushion.
So that is not in the 2.1.
Correct.
That's above.
That's strictly construction costs. And on top of that, we have spent approximately $20,000 on hazardous material testing. And the result of that testing found asbestos. And so we know that asbestos needs to be abated. And so the estimate for that is about $60,000. And then the balance to get it up to the 190, which is just the 5% construction contingency recommended by the architect, that's about $110,000. So in terms of how can it cost so much, that's where that money goes. The cushion is absorbed by existing A&E fees, and the extra 190 would go to testing, hazardous materials, remediation, and then a construction cushion of 110,000, which is 5% of that low bid.
I just think $110,000 cushion is a lot when you're taking that money away from other nonprofits. Also, I think one of the biggest things in Grand Forks right now is homeless families. We don't have anything. I shouldn't say we don't have anything, but we don't. The mission doesn't allow families. So there's this need that's growing in Grand Forks too, and so I don't just want to think of just one nonprofit. And I know the senior center is our building, but I think there's just so much need in Grand Forks, it becomes a little overwhelming.
That is true, and typically, whatever our budget, we get requests that are at least double. So you're correct, the need is huge, and the funding is always short of the need. And to your point, I appreciate you bringing it up. The CAC did recommend that whatever amount of funding is put out there for a competitive process, they recommended prioritizing certain community needs as we advertise and in the ranking process, and those included assistance for homeless families, mental and behavioral health services, and accessible and affordable housing. So that would be part of the advertisement of availability of funds. These types of applications are particularly encouraged.
Mr. Weigel? Yes, sir.
I'd move approval of staff recommendation with the $50,000 compromise that you mentioned.
I second.
A motion by Weigel, second by Osowski. Further comment?
Was it just a $50,000 compromise you were talking about?
Yeah.
But it was also the removal of the administrative
It was
expense.
50,000 from administration to the competitive bidding.
Okay.
So from 105 to 55,000 for administration.
I thought that you were also talking about another 50 from the 200 to do the 100. We've got a motion. I'm ready to vote. This is advisory to next week. We
Correct.
can talk to constituents between now and then. Great.
Very good.
Thanks.
Further comment? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Pose same sign.
Aye.
Motion carries. Slutsky dissents. Thank you very much. Item 3.4, task order amendment, supplemental task order and presentation update, project 8567, South End Interior Flood Protection Master Planning Process. Mr. Grasser, good evening.
Good evening. President Sandy and members of the committee. Tonight, we're going to talk about the master planning concept. I'm going to do some introductions here. Following me will be Sean Gaddy, AE2S. He'll go over some more of the technical aspects. And then wrapping up will be Christian Danielson. If you have any specific questions on the task orders. Waiting in the wings, we do have our deep dive technical expert, Amber Leffers, if you guys really want to get into the details of what the studies are talking about. So a little bit of excuse me, a little bit of background. Remember, the whole exercise here for the city of Grand Forks is to provide protection from flooding from both the river and overland for our residents. Right now, we are under a LOMAR that means we don't have to pay, get into the mandatory flood insurance program. That's a big deal. We have had indications in the past. You know, we did a drainage study in 2008, perimeter drainage study, and even within that study, as we looked ahead, if we applied our current design standards to our entire drainage area, we were probably not going to be able to keep South End Drainway and English Coulee compliant with basically the FEMA flood rules. So we had indications, but we didn't have the computer models, and so that's part of what this study is doing, is generating those computer models to refine that, and they are giving us some indications of what our needs are, and some of that comes down to storage. I do want to give some kudos to Mike Corman and Ed Lieberman as they were working on the Grand Valley design on the far south end. That pond is designed approximately where we think we're going to need to be for storage requirements. So we've actually been kind of implementing some of this stuff before it's all fully finalized. Again, this one just says we started a year ago and we've been working hard. This item here just gives some background. PDA 3, that's perimeter drainage study. Again, the original study was done in 2008. Drainage area 3 is basically on the west side of the interstate. Drainage area 4 is on the east side. They are different. One goes into the English Coulee, one goes into the South End Drainway. So in follow-up presentations, you'll hear a lot of references to, PDA 3 and PDA 4. So that's what those areas are geographically. You will see everything basically ends on Merrifield Road to the south. That's a rather high rural road. It's also part of our flood protection cutoff levee. Just on the south of that is Drain 4. So when we talk about County Drain 4, that's the ditch that when you drive that road, you'll see that on the south side. We have what I think are pretty exciting results in here. When we first started, I was under the general understanding we were probably going to have to push an additional outlet to the river. That's very, very expensive. We're talking tens of millions of dollars type of activity for that. Really, though, what we've found is we've been refining the processes. We can probably manage to make the South End Drainway work primarily with storage. I have to update the storage, again, probably close to what we have at the Grand Valley Pond. So that's actually really good news for us, I think, as far as being able to contain costs and to prevent the flooding. This is part of the additional analysis that we need to be moving forward. Again, these are in the form of the task orders. There's an amendment and a new task order. The first two bullet points are really the amendment to the task order that we brought in a year ago. A year ago, we said we were going to bring in a task order in about a year to start looking at drainage area 4. Well, okay, a year's passed. We're bringing that task order in as an amendment to start looking at drain 4. In addition, as we've been exploring the option and ability to do storage, we've had to do some additional computer runs. We also need to look at how we might refine that to make sure we're looking at cost-effective alternatives as we move forward, and then also applying these things to both drainage area 3 and drainage area 4. The last bullet point is a new task order. As the city has supported the 47th Avenue interchange, and given the fact we're looking at imminent development in that area, we really need to look at more detail as to how we're going to handle the stormwater in that. Not just that, but I think there might be an opportunity I want to explore. If you think about an interchange, it needs lots of dirt, right? And if we're going to do storage as part of our ponding and things on resolving our interior drainage, that's digging a big hole. I'd sure like to combine those two things and get a double bang for the buck. Dig a hole, generate dirt, get that dirt on the interchange. Maybe a crazy idea, but I think that's part of what we want to look at. And again, and also looking at, where we want to route the pipes, things like that. So that's really what the task orders are in. This is a really abbreviated summary of dollars. So when we came in a year ago, we weren't sure if we were going to get a Department of Water Resources cost share on the dollars, and subsequently we did. They are cost sharing on those components that are dealing with the rural drainage. They don't participate in the urban drainage component, but they do in the rural. Bunch of numbers here, some pluses and some minuses, and when you get to the end, when we look at what we are looking for additional change orders, adding in what the Water Commission has already committed to and what we think they'll commit to on the next set of task orders, we're at $493,000. We're under the original $568,000 that we had originally looked at for local expenditures. So fortuitous, the pluses and the minuses tend to cancel each other out. I went pretty quick. Are there any questions on my part of it here? If not, I'll turn it over to Mr. Gaddy, AE2S.
No questions. Thank you, Mr. Grasser.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Gaddy?
Good evening, President Sandy, members of the committee. I'm just going to get into a little bit more detail on some of the stuff Al hit on quite high level. President Sandy has asked me to be efficient in my presentation here this evening, so I'm going to do my best to go through this quickly and, like I said, hit just a little bit further a layer down on what Al just presented. Much of what Al just said is embedded in these bullets. I'm going to hit on each of these in a little, like I said, in a little bit more granularity to just give a little bit more context as to what we have been looking at with the study overall. One of the big pieces of this planning process has been data gathering, and then as Al has talked about, computer modeling, hydraulic model building. Much of the progress that we have made just in pictures is represented on this slide here. And we've done a lot of work looking at the build-out area. So up on top left there, the land use plan. And it's not even so much land use as much as it is the intensity of development. And so we really wanted to make sure as we were looking across the development area and the build-out to these drainage conveyances, the English Coulee, South End Drainway, that we understood the likely intensity of development impervious area that is likely to be contained within those boundaries. There's been a lot of data collection. Our models ultimately are built on quite a bit of data on all the pipes throughout the city, the various elevations and the drainway itself, the culvert crossings, et cetera, are all information that gets built into what is now a rather robust, what's called XP SWIM 2D model. And that model, like I said, requires a lot of data to make it work. And so a lot of work, a lot of help from city staff building out the model to get everything that we need included. On top of that, in order to validate the modeling, we also put in place this year watershed monitoring. And so you may have noticed on a few culvert crossings, they're on Legal Drain 4 and throughout the South End Drainway, there's various little sensors that were placed on the culverts. Those sensors are both water level monitors. So as rain events have happened throughout the watershed, it's telling us how the drainway, how the English Coulee, et cetera, are reacting to rain in order for us ultimately to calibrate our models to say, okay, what our computer model is saying is actually being proven out throughout the watershed. Unfortunately, this year, we didn't get any really great gushers. Well, I should say fortunately and unfortunately, we didn't get any really great gushers. And so one of the things that's included to the amendment is expanding this monitoring into 2024 to just, again, help us make sure the models are telling us the truth in essence as we look at how the watershed's actually reacting and the system's reacting. As I mentioned, all of that has gone into model build, and the build has been pretty detailed with all of the, like I said, the monitoring data, the land use plan, all of the existing infrastructure network, all of that is built into the model. We now have, like I said, a rather robust working model for us to test a lot of these concepts. In terms of modeling, we really look at things two ways. We look at it as far as what's the risk in the system as it exists today, and then we look at it as what's the risk in the system as we continue to build out and add more infrastructure, more development to the system, which generally generates more water, higher flows in the system. So one of the big things that we validated is the risk. We validated with the model is the risk in terms of for what has either been developed or has been approved to be developed under current standards. What's the risk in the system that we're seeing within that modeling? Generally, what we are seeing is represented on this graphic here, and this graphic is what's called a hydraulic profile. And so if you looked on the left-hand side, essentially that's the upper end of the drainway working towards like the interstate around the 34th Street area. The very lower end is all the way down to the levee, basically across Belmont Road to where the drainway discharges to the Red River. And so what this is representing is essentially if you were to look down the drainway, cut it in half and say, okay, how high is the water getting as we make our way all the way down? We're looking at two different primary conditions. We're looking at the risk of the system under summer thunderstorm conditions and the risk of the system under more of your springtime runoff conditions when the gates are closed and the pump station at the bottom end is having to pump water out. In general, what we're showing is that under the existing conditions, we are generally there as far as the capacity in a summer thunderstorm. That would be the blue line. And then under the spring runoff condition, we're showing that there is, in essence, not enough storage currently in the system for all that water to be held back when the gates are closed. And so a lot of what we've been looking at then, like I said, is in that developed condition, how much more storage do we need to add, as Mr. Grasser was discussing, and what other improvements do we potentially need to make to routing to make the system work. So this graphic is looking at specifically for perimeter drainage area number 4, which is the south end drainway watershed. Really, how did we model that build out? So if I went back 2 graphics, you can see that's kind of the system as it exists. All the green is all the undeveloped area. This is testing the model to say, okay, as we build out all the red, what's going to happen within the system? And generally what we're seeing is if we proceed with the current development standards, as Mr. Grasser mentioned, we're going to likely see issues with water levels that are too high, placing a higher risk, and essentially having the drainway with not enough capacity to convey the flows that will be created from that. And so one of the big things we're looking at with the modeling, again, as Mr. Grasser mentioned, is how much more storage, i.e. how big of ponds do we need throughout the system? What are the best locations to discharge those ponds into the drainway? And generally, what is the balance between conveyance and the size of ponds provided in order to make the system work overall? So this graphic is representing if we were to just proceed with the standards as are documented to the city's current stormwater management manual, what do we expect would happen within the system? And generally, you see that red line pushing far above our target black dashed line elevations, which shows we've got more risk there than we would want, and we need to do something different with standards. So that is really one of the big things, like I said, we have been looking at within Drainage Area 4 is modifying those standards, iterating on how much storage in the system, again, looking at those discharge points throughout the system, and really taking a look, like I said, closely at what are we likely driving towards for those future standards. In Perimeter Drainage Area 3, that is a part of the, so if we looked west of the interstate, that's a part of the study we're just kind of getting into. We've done a lot of work on the Area 4. We've, I think, solved a lot of, or answered a lot of tough questions in Area 4, and we'll be looking here over the next couple of months to make further progress on Area 3 within the study. So in general, if you look at those profile plots, the upper end of the drainway, as you can see, we had elevations pushing out beyond what we would like to see within the drainway overall. So like I said, further iteration is needed to really dial that in, but we have started some of that iteration, and we can show you some of those results here. So generally, like I said, the upper end of the drainway, as we look at that 34th Street area, kind of just south of the target development, what's happening in that location. That's one of the areas we're really specifically focusing on, is how do we manage that. As Mr. Grasser mentioned, a lot of this will also be in consideration as we consider how the 47th Avenue interchange and its surrounding infrastructure is ultimately configured. That's a key piece to one of the task orders that we're requesting here tonight, is to really refine what we do in the upper end of the drainway watershed in order to determine, like I said, the best placement, sizing, et cetera, of infrastructure in that location. What we are showing through some of our initial model runs, though, is that if we do place that expanded storage into the system, we're able to, in essence, reduce the risk of future development down to near existing development standards. We haven't completely modeled it down to the point where we're getting those elevations in the drainway down below what we would hope to see as far as targets, and again, in the black dash line as indicated here. But it is one of the key things we'll be looking at with our future modeling runs, is exactly how do we work the infrastructure in the upper end reaches of drainage area 4 to drive these elevations and ultimately the risk down in these locations. So like I said, what's next and what's included in these amendments is essentially to really iterate further on what is the right solution in these locations. Ultimately, what that will drive towards is what are the new development standards that we are going to be requesting of developers as far as what they provide for storage and how they configure that storage and the discharge of that to the drainway. And that will ultimately, like I said, be a rewrite of the manual as it exists today. And so modeling to the point where we are confident exactly what we should be placing to the manual and updating that manual. And then last piece, on an even more detailed level, is making sure that as we plan for the 47th Avenue interchange location, we have that more specifically dialed in for that nearer term infrastructure development, exactly what's going to be required in that location. Like I mentioned, looking ahead, perimeter drainage area 3, there are a couple of key challenges we're looking at in drainage area 3, where we do know from both this planning study, as well as, if you'll recall, the English Coulee master planning study, that we do have some elevation issues within the English Coulee itself as well. And so we'll be starting to iterate on that here, like I said, in the coming months, and be bringing back results related to looking at west of the interstate, the flows that go north to Legal Drain 9, ultimately into the English Coulee. And we'll be developing recommendations for that, like I said, in the near future here. So with that, I'm going to ask Mr. Danielson to come up and just give a summary of the task orders and amendments that are here this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gaddy. Mr. Danielson?
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, President Sandy, members of the committee. So I'll keep it really quick here. Al and Sean hit on most of the major points here. I'm just going to give a brief summary of what we're looking for approval from you guys for tonight. So the first is going to be that amendment to the original task order, and that is going to essentially take us across the finish line, get us to those final determinations of what we're going to need to be requiring in some of these development areas. That amendment is in the amount of $279,340, and we do think that this one is going to be eligible for some further State Water Commission cost sharing, so we will be pursuing that one, and that should bring that cost down by 50 to 60%, depending on how much they allocate towards that. Second is the separate task order that is aimed at further analyzing that 47th Avenue interchange area, making sure we're ready for that imminent development that's coming in there. And that task order is $95,540. We don't think that that one's going to be eligible for State Water Commission cost sharing because of its more urban nature. So that one likely will not get that share. But like Al mentioned, ultimately, with all the cost shares considered in the amendments and new task orders added into the study, we're going to be net lower than we were when we started, or at least that's where it's looking right now. So, and along with that, any necessary budget amendments that might go with approving these amendments and separate task orders. So,
Thank you, Mr. Danielson. Any questions for Mr. Grasser, Mr. Danielson, or Mr. Gaddy? I have a quick question, Mr. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Mr. V.
Okay, sorry, thank you, President Sandy. One of the questions I have, and maybe it's for Mr. Gaddy, I'm not sure, but as we're looking at future runoff, it's really apparent that today, I think our runoff rates are greater than they were maybe 20 years ago, and you look at the potential we have for climate change and the like. How are we addressing what those future runoff flows might be? Obviously, we don't know that, but we see them moving in that direction to incorporate that into the overall study that's underway.
Good question, Mr. V. And the models that we have right now, the precipitation models are coming out from the National Weather Service. But one of the things we want to do on here is I want to stress test the model when we get done and add, I'm going to say something like, 5 or 10% additional precipitation, assuming that precipitation continues the trend that it has for the last, 30 years of an increase. And so that'll give us an indication that, we don't want to build it and then have it become kind of out of date already, because that's part of what we're dealing with right now, is that there has been increased precipitation since the Corps did their original study. So that's one of the ideas that we're looking at, trying to incorporate future climate change or climatology into our system.
Okay, well, thank you, Al. I appreciate that. I'm not for sure that's enough as we look ahead, but at least we got to take that into consideration.
Any further comments or questions, Mr. V?
Nope, that'd be it. Thanks.
So, Mr. Grasser and Mr. Getty, general observation, we need more storage. Are we designing the same? You're talking about changing the design standards. Are we just making the ponds deeper, or are we taking more land?
It's probably going to be both. The ponds will need to be larger than the current standard. Again, they're going to be very close to what we see on the Grand Valley model. So it's not, a huge change from what we originally had. You're not going to really notice the difference of it. I mean, the developers will. We're going to have to get some additional land. When I look at my crystal ball, I think the city may have to up our policy on participation on pond construction when we get to that point, because to me, this is part of our flood protection project process. Is maintaining the integrity of it, and those will be questions that we'll have to get. We haven't really gotten into those financial pieces of it, but
But I can see the developers being quite concerned.
Absolutely.
Also, for potential homeowners or commercial property, the additional cost for the ponds are already expensive, so we're certainly going to, if we're incorporating them as part of the flood protection that people are paying their special assessments for, I think probably that's a great way to help finance it, to keep the ultimate cost to the purchaser down.
and in that regard, being you open up that subject matter, that again goes back to the 47th interchange thing. If we can find out, if we can build a city-sponsored pond to help take care of that will actually help hold some of the developer ponds, not as extensive as it might otherwise have to be. So again, if we can kill two birds with one stone.
In our right of way, right?
Well, we would probably have to buy additional property
right.
to do that, but again, those are questions and things that we'll have to talk about in more depth, but I see paths into addressing some of what you're talking about.
Great, I'm just glad you're thinking about it. Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Any further comments or questions? There's a staff recommendation to approve the task order and the additional amount for
I'll
A2S.
move approval, please.
Of the
I'll make
staff
that motion.
recommendation. There's a motion by Weber, second by Osowski. Further comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Good presentation tonight. Item 3.5, create special assessment district, project 8738, District 777, reconstruction 10th Avenue North from 5th Street to 500 feet west. Good evening.
Good evening, President Sandy, members of the committee. The project before you is the Reconstruct 10th Avenue North project from North 5th Street to 500 feet west. The existing road conditions consist of concrete that varies in width from 21 feet to 31 feet. It was originally constructed in 1929. Records indicate that it was overlaid with asphalt in 1999. The existing pavement surface is severely cracked, broken, sunken, potholed, and it lacks adequate drainage. The proposed reconstruction project will replace the overlaid concrete section with a 30-foot wide concrete urban roadway section with curb and gutter, storm sewer improvements, streetlights, and sidewalk improvements. The total construction cost for this project is estimated to be $480,000. The city share of that would be $384,000, and that would come out of the Street and Infrastructure Fund 4815, where there was a total budgeted amount of $307,000. There's been a project timetable that's included with your staff report. So with that, staff recommends to approve the engineer's report, create the special assessment district, and direct engineering to prepare plans and specifications for project 8738, District 777, reconstruct 10th Avenue North from North 5th Street to 500 feet west. Any questions?
Okay, good presentation. Thank you. Questions or comments?
No, thanks, Logan, and I'll move approval.
Moved by Weber, second by Osowski. Further comment? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 3.6, funding project 8071, North End Reliever Sanitary Force Main. Ms. Severson, good evening.
Hi, good evening. So this project's been before you back in like 2021. I brought this forward, very similar path, but in 2021 I brought forward a project scoping project. So what that entailed was us applying for the similar project through BRIC to get money to apply for this project. Brief history is this project is intended to install a reliever force main. And on your project map, there's 2 locations that WFW worked on as part of the scoping. What this force main will do is we can use it during times of high flows. If there's a break in the force main, we have a relief force main rather than having the basements fill up in that area or our potential of discharging to the river. So from that project scoping, we were awarded about $325,000, which our local share was 25%, and so we got about $240,000 from the federal government. Now we're going to move to construction. FEMA, the state office, has asked that we get our application in sooner rather than later so they can help provide technical assistance. So they've asked that we submit that potentially in the next week or two, and the deadline is January. Right now, the total cost of the project is $9 million. Which included in that $9 million is a rehab of Lift Station 5, which also experiences a lot of I&I. And with all the development downtown, we know it's stressed out. So we're looking tonight to get that letter match approved and submitted with our application for review.
Okay, good presentation. Seems important. Moved by Weber, second by Osowski. Further comments? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Severson. And item 3.7, Design Bidding and Construction Administration Agreement Services, Engineering Services Agreement, Project 8809, Upgrade Lift Stations 24 and 27.
Thank you. So this project is in our budget for 2024. Similar to the other one, the last one, Lift Station 5, 24, and 27 are 2 busy stations that have been rehabbed in over 20 years. So this will upgrade the pumps and the controls and drives in these 2 stations and get them up to last another 20 to 30 years. So this right now is just a task order with WFW to start on design, and then we'll get us through construction.
Thank you. Comments?
I move approval.
Moved by Osowski, second by Weigel. Thank you. Any comments? Further comments? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Severson. Item 3.8, Project 8736, Biodredge and Biosolids Reduction Program. Ms. Parvey, good evening.
Good evening, President Sandy, members of the committee. Tonight I'm bringing before you asking for the approval to give the Solutions Group award the proposal to continue to biodredge within our lagoons. We actually did an RFP back in September and received 2 proposals, one from Spectrum Water and one from the Solutions Group. We currently are working with the Solutions Group. We began a pilot project in 2022 and had success and continued on into 2023. At that time, we haven't calculated all of the data from 2023. Obviously, we're still working on that program, but do feel that we've seen enough progress in order to continue with the work that we've done to date. This was in our budget. Initially planned to just spread the biosolids or mechanically dredge them throughout the pond, but we've been able to reduce it with this treatment process. So we're recommending that we award that proposal to the Solutions Group.
Thanks, Ms. Parvey. Comments or questions? Ms. Osowski moves approval, second by Weber. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Let's do items 3.9 and 3.10 together. 3.9, North Dakota Section 5310 funding application and North Dakota Section 5339 funding application, both for 2025 funds. 5310 for North Dakota DOT grant application for enhanced mobility for seniors, and 3339 and 8515 cost share from North Dakota DOT through the feds to replace several buses. Mr. Bergman, good evening. Anything else to add to that?
It's our normal time of the year that we come and ask for, to put in these applications for the funding for these vehicles. The 5310 one has the mobility manager, wages and benefits in that one, plus the 4 vans that we'd have for replacements that were 2019s.
Great.
And the 5339 funds, in discussion with that, that is replacement of 5 vehicles. 4 of them would be the larger vehicles that we'd have to replace that are out on the roads right now. They are getting to be pretty expensive. Right now, we got one that's in there looking for an engine replacement. We're looking at $60,000 just for the engine replacement, and it's a 2010 model. So they've reached their maximum life and their miles already, so we're looking at the funding, and as I stated earlier today, the current cost is $635,000 apiece. That's for the diesel models. If we go with the newer hybrid models that we're looking at, hydrogen fuel cell ones, we could be looking at the $980,000 mark. So I figured we'd go with the cheaper one.
Great. Moved by Weber, second by Osowski. Further comment? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Weigel, anything for the good of the order?
Nope.
Ms. Osowski?
No, Mr.
Mr. Weber?
These weren't particularly sexy or exciting topics tonight, but it's so critically important to the safety and well-being of our community. And thanks for all the thoughtful work that's gone into this.
Good work tonight
Thanks.
by everybody. Yeah. Mr. Veen, comments for the good of the order?
Nothing additional, thank you.
Ms. Lensky, is there a motion to adjourn by Osowski, second by Weigel? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. We're adjourned. Thank you.